investigation into Celeste Rivas' death. That order was sought only to ensure detectives from the Robbery Homicide Division learned of important information surrounding her death before the media.
The order was not sought to undermine transparency. That sentence was released by the Los Angeles Police Department on November 21, 2025. The same day, a judge granted their request to seal every page of Celeste Rivas Hernandez's autopsy file. The court order carried a single case number. The press release carried a promise. And the gap between the two is where this entire prosecution now sits, 7 months later, bracing for a hearing that the state finally admits it cannot delay any longer. Think of a body bag zipped inside the front trunk of a Tesla. Insects still active on its surface, parked in an LA tow yard under direct sunlight. The car's battery was dead, but the mechanical clock of the investigation was not. Evidence log, tagged, photographed. And yet, at the same moment, the agency that held that body was telling a court it had insufficient jurisdiction to keep its own findings quiet. The decomposition was advanced, the paperwork was pristine. That contrast is not a detail. It is the load-bearing beam of what is about to happen in Department 30 of the Los Angeles Superior Court. Before we go deeper into what the documents actually show, make sure you're subscribed to Crime Files 911, because we don't just cover the story, we follow the evidence. The paperwork already knew. On July 21, 2026, a preliminary hearing will begin in the case of David Burke. The recording artist known as David, he faces charges of first-degree murder with special circumstances.
First start here, David. David is the romantic homicide singer currently charged with first-degree murder, continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14, and unlawful mutilation of human remains, all in connection with the death of 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Prosecutors allege that he was in a sexual relationship with her, that back on April 23, 2025, David allegedly lured her to his rental home in LA, stabbed her to death, allegedly watched her bleed out, and then reportedly took horrifying measures to conceal this alleged crime. All in an effort, according to prosecutors, to keep Celeste quiet about their relationship, to prevent her from coming forward, to prevent her from ruining his lucrative career. The special circumstances allegations in this case that carry heftier penalties, potentially the death penalty, murder of a witness, murder for financial gain, lying in wait, that he allegedly used a deadly and dangerous weapon, a sharp instrument. Prosecutors allege he purchased a blue inflatable pool, chainsaws, a body bag, heavy-duty laundry bags, that he dismembered her body, that he allegedly made suspicious trips to the Santa Barbara County area, that he purportedly lied to friends and associates about the alleged smell of decomposition in his place. And then you go to September 8th, 2025. This is the day after what would have been Celeste's 15th birthday. Her dismembered, decomposed body is found, reportedly in the front trunk of a Tesla, allegedly registered to David at an LA tow yard. At the tow yard, LAPD detectives opened the Tesla's front storage compartment and reportedly find this black cadaver bag that is covered in insects. And inside the bag, authorities claim they discovered a severely decomposed head and torso. A plastic garbage bag beneath the black cadaver bag reportedly contained the dismembered arms and legs. Now, Celeste's ring and pinky fingers on her left hand had reportedly been amputated. They weren't found in the Tesla. And this is a level of graphic.
Continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14 and unlawful mutilation of human remains. The victim, Celeste Rivas Hernandez, was 14 years old. According to the prosecution's felony complaint, Burke lured her to a rental home, stabbed her twice, watched her bleed, and then purchased a blue inflatable pool, chainsaws, a body bag, and heavy-duty laundry bags. Her dismembered remains were discovered on September 8, 2025, the day after what would have been her 15th birthday. 2 fingers from her left hand were never recovered. That is the criminal narrative. But the structural narrative is this: for 10 months, this case did not move. It oscillated between status conferences that lasted 4 minutes, 8 minutes, 12 minutes. Defense counsel cited the volume of digital discovery. The court accommodated. Then, on July 7, 2026, the rhythm broke. The judge set not a continuation, but a multi-day evidentiary window.
And here's the major update. It's not that David isn't looking great, or that his defense attorneys are still stalling for more time as part of their strategy. The significant update today following the status conference is that this case is actually moving forward. This is now our 3rd status conference in this David case that we're chatting about. The last 2, as you recall, deja vu, because we've done this now a couple times. They were both continued, meaning the case was essentially delayed during those last 2 status conferences in May and in June. Well, this time, we all came in expecting this case to be continued, again, to essentially be delayed one more time. But no, they're moving forward. This is actually going to a preliminary hearing now, and that is set to start on Tuesday, July 21st, so 2 weeks from today. And Jesse, it was just a very different kind of atmosphere today, different energy. As soon as I walked in, I noted on defense and prosecution, it felt like they were kind of on the same page. They both understood. I think this case was finally going to move forward. So the judge closed by, chatting with them about how water and coffee would be allowed in the courtroom moving forward. She made a joke about how we're going to be here for the long haul. So again, preliminary hearing starting Tuesday, July 21st. And they've mapped out, dates for the next 2 weeks in case that hearing takes more time. So Tuesday the 21st, Wednesday the 23rd, Thursday the 24th, Friday the 25th, and this could drag on into the following week, especially as they get into evidentiary hearings, because we know there is
The prosecution confirmed that all relevant discovery had been transmitted. The defense confirmed receipt, and for the first time since the arrest, both sides stood in the same courtroom and told the same judge the same word. Ready. Why now? The answer sits inside a sealed protective order that was signed off the record at the end of that hearing.
Julia, what about this protective order that I understand something was put in place today by the court?
Yeah, that was interesting. This conversation started actually months ago, and there was a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of debate between defense and prosecution about how to protect parties involved in this ongoing case. So apparently, prosecution sent back a revised draft of what they thought would be an acceptable protective order back in May. And they haven't been able to agree upon anything until today. So defense attorneys came back and said, they've reached a conclusion about what they felt like they needed. That was submitted to the court today. And it sounds like the judge signed off on those protective orders at the end of the hearing. That bit might have actually been off the record. That was not something they shared in open court with most media present. But they did state that they've agreed upon what they need in protective orders. They did not say who it covers, but we can guess there might be people on the witness list who are covered by those protective orders.
And particularly in a case this high profile, where you already have a question about jury selection, it's not surprising that you see these.
We do not know whose names it covers. We do know it was drafted, revised, rejected, and redrafted for 2 months before both parties finally agreed. We also know that a defense investigator now has a designated chair at counsel table, and the court spent real time discussing where witnesses would sit, how they would be shielded, and whether grand jury transcripts would arrive as paper or digital files. A case that once looked frozen has suddenly developed the logistical heat of a trial that nobody wants to lose. And that brings us to the medical examiner's office, where the logic of secrecy collapsed inward. The autopsy was completed on December 9, 2025. The cause of death, multiple penetrating injuries. The manner, homicide.
The medical examination for Celeste was completed on December 9, 2025, and the results were released after David's arrest. The findings in part, I'm going to read verbatim from the summary portion. Quote, autopsy examination was limited by extensive post-mortem changes. There are 2 penetrating wounds of the torso with smooth edges that may represent sharp force injuries. The wound on the upper abdomen penetrates the liver, and the wound on the left chest penetrates one of the left intercostal spaces with disruption of the adjacent ribs' cortical surfaces. The left lung appears intact. The bilateral upper and lower extremities show full thickness dismemberment. Multiple other skin and soft tissue defects are present without apparent associated internal injuries. The etiology of these defects is not clearly apparent due to severe post-mortem changes. Post-mortem toxicology performed on liver tissue shows the presence of a low level of ethanol, which may be due to post-mortem changes or ingestion and does not appear to be contributory to the cause of death. Given the history and circumstances as currently known by me in the setting of the findings by examination, ancillary studies, and in the absence of other definitive causes of death, the cause of death is multiple penetrating injuries. The manner of...
The report notes 2 wounds with smooth edges, one piercing the liver, the other disrupting rib surfaces. But the summary also records that postmortem changes were so extensive that the etiology of multiple skin defects could not be determined. Decomposition had swallowed detail, and for 5 months, that report sat behind a court-ordered security hold, a hold the chief medical examiner, Dr. Odey Ukpo, publicly opposed.
November 21st, 2025, the court ordered that the LAPD medical examiner's report and information about Celeste's death be sealed. that a security hold was placed to prevent any information from reaching the media. The ME's office came out with a statement saying, at the time, at 10:54 a.m. on Friday, November 21st, the County of Los Angeles Department of Medical Examiner received a court order initiated by the Los Angeles Police Department to place a security hold on medical examiner case number 2025-14252, Celeste Rivas Hernandez. No records or details associated with the case, including the cause and manner of death and medical examiner report, can be released or posted on the website until further notice. The chief medical examiner, Dr. Odey Ukpo, is quoted in a press release saying the following at the time. Quote, the department's mission is to have full transparency with the community by providing information about our cases to empower people to make changes that save lives. Since becoming the department head, I've worked on eradicating the practice of placing security holds on medical examiner cases simply by law enforcement request. The practice of security holds is virtually unheard of in other counties and has not been proven to improve outcomes in the legal system. We are dedicated to serving our community with full transparency. However, the law precludes us from doing so while the court order remains in this case. By the way, LAPD robbery homicide issued a statement at the time saying in part, quote, the LAPD sought to seal the records of the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's investigation into Celeste Rivas' death. That order was sought only to ensure detectives from the robbery homicide division learned of important information surrounding her death before the media.
He called the practice virtually unheard of in other counties and insisted his department was dedicated to serving our community with full transparency. The LAP countered that the seal was necessary to prevent the media from learning information before detectives did. Then, last month, NBC News reported that more than a dozen employees of the same medical examiner's office are under internal investigation for allegedly viewing law enforcement files without authorization.
Okay, so this is new. So before I even talk about what happened in court today, NBC News has reported that more than a dozen employees of the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office are under investigation for allegedly viewing law enforcement investigation files without the appropriate authorization. So the release of details of Celeste's death before the autopsy was published for the whole world to see, that may have started this. The outlet reports that the Celeste case may have prompted this probe by the Human Resources Department. Now, neither the ME's office nor the union representing the office's investigators has issued a comment at the time of this recording other than this union saying, quote, we expect the county to conduct any investigation professionally, fairly, and without prejudice. We encourage others to allow the process to run its course before making conclusions. The union that represents other staff members of the ME's office wrote, quote, we can say unequivocally that our union remains firmly committed to safeguarding the privacy of all victims. Patient privacy is an issue we take seriously, especially because so many of our union members work in healthcare and interact with patients either directly or indirectly. Now, let me just tell you why this is so interesting, because it was reported that the LAPD robbery homicide division, which is leading this investigation into Celeste's death, had asked the ME's office at one point in time not to release Celeste's records, and that the ME's office reportedly...
The union representing some of those staff members released a statement about safeguarding patient privacy. The union representing other staff members issued a separate statement, urging the process to run its course. The probe may have been triggered by unauthorized access to investigative material tied directly to the Celeste Rivas Hernandez case. In other words, the very file that the LAPD fought to protect from the public was apparently being consumed inside the building tasked with protecting it.
About this update, I mentioned it before. So NBC News has reported that more than a dozen employees of the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Office are under investigation for allegedly viewing law enforcement files without the appropriate specific authorization. That it might have been the Celeste Rivas Hernandez's case, that's ignited all this. You are somebody who is in LA, you know the interplay between the medical examiner's office and the LAPD. Do you have any more information about this? Because it feels like a pretty significant development.
You know, innocent until proven guilty. We don't actually know what this investigation is going to lead to. We don't know for sure. I know the agency hasn't said if this actually did come to light because of the Celeste case, but there have been details, there have been bits of information floating around online, and we don't know where they came from. So hopefully we get more information when this investigation wraps up. But I do know Eric Leonard, investigative reporter at NBC4 LA, reported this yesterday. And I think it's just more noise around this case. There's so much buzz. There is so much interest. I think you recall after the Kobe Bryant helicopter crash and investigation, right? That was an issue as well. There were allegations of people improperly sharing things they had access to. So curious to see what comes of that. And then, of course, what is relevant in courts is whether that impacts the case at all, and whether that's a thread that either the defense or the prosecution can pull on. Because you know this as well as anybody, Jesse, anything that is not handled the right way, anything that's not up to par, could lead to the integrity of the case really being...
The paperwork already knew. Here's the question that turns this from a legal proceeding into a national security of justice problem. If the government's own death investigators could not resist opening a sealed file, what structural assurance exists that a jury, seated in the same county, breathing the same leaked air, will evaluate only the evidence admitted in court? This is not a hypothetical. The defense has already signaled interest in grand jury transcripts from proceedings that never resulted in an indictment.
Orders being put in place to preserve information coming out. What about grand jury transcripts? So I understand there was a conversation about that too, and that's interesting because that's part of a larger conversation we've had in this case, right? This was not an indictment through a grand jury. This is trying to move forward through a preliminary hearing, right? There's two ways for this case to progress. And our understanding is there has been several grand juries that have been impaneled this case, maybe to evaluate evidence, but we don't know if whether or not these were grand juries that had the power to indict or not, but there has been no grand jury indictment, right? There's been no official charging of him through a grand jury, but it seems the defense is interested in transcripts of what happened at these proceedings.
That should be something shared during the discovery process. And you're right, Jesse. I think there have been way more questions than answers when it comes to that piece of this murder investigation. There was no grand jury indictment, and we really don't know what went down as a part of that process. So they had questions just about the logistics of how they were going to get those transcripts. That sounds like, are they getting recordings? Are they getting a stack of papers with printed transcripts? Are they getting a digital file download? And the prosecution and judge responded that they would actually go through the grand jury for that. But once defense attorneys get their hands on that data, however it may be coming through, you can bet bits and pieces of that relevant to their case, relevant.
That means they are hunting for prior sworn testimony, for inconsistencies, for exculpatory material that may have been presented to citizens behind closed doors and then buried. The protective order is now in place, but the information ecosystem is already contaminated. The preliminary hearing will be the first public stress test of whether contamination becomes reversible error. The prosecution's task at this hearing is straightforward in legal terms, but heavy in evidentiary logistics. They must establish probable cause.
Discovery.
Let's take a step back here. So I looked at some of the notes here. They set up actual times when court would start for all of those days. A preliminary hearing in this case is significant because that is when the prosecution will have the opportunity to present their case. Now, not all of their case. They have to present sufficient evidence to establish probable cause, sufficient evidence that there is probable cause David committed or allegedly committed these crimes to convince the court there is enough to go forward with an actual trial. Now, this is in front of the judge, this is in front of the court. There's no jury here. It's a low standard, right? It's a low bar. By all accounts, the prosecution, from what we've seen, will have sufficient evidence for this case to move forward, but it does give the opportunity for the defense.
A low bar that David Burke committed the alleged acts. They will present enough forensic data, digital records, and witness testimony to convince a judge to bind the case over for trial. The defense, for its part, will do what defense attorneys do when the discovery is voluminous and the charges carry special circumstances. They will challenge every link. They will question chain of custody on the Tesla. They will examine the timeline of the pool and chainsaw purchases. They will ask whether the medical examiner's own inability to determine the origin of certain soft tissue defects undercuts the narrative of deliberate mutilation. They will argue that decomposition obscures and that obscurity is reasonable doubt. David Burke is eligible for the death penalty. California has a gubernatorial moratorium on executions, but the statute still classifies this as a capital case. The special circumstance allegations, murder of a witness, murder for financial gain, lying in wait, are not decorative. They are jurisdictional hooks that change every strategic calculus in the room. A preliminary hearing in a capital case is not a mere formality. It is the first battlefield where the state must show its evidence without overplaying its hand for trial. The defense will watch for what is shown and, more importantly, for what is held back. The visual that will dominate this hearing is not inside the courtroom. It is the image the jury will never see: that black cadaver bag, photographed by LAPD crime scene technicians, its exterior crawling with insect evidence that later helped establish post-mortem interval. The bag itself is both container and symbol. It held a body that had been separated into components, placed into garbage bags, and hidden inside a compartment designed to store luggage. The vehicle that held it was towed because it was abandoned. The girl inside had a name, a birthday, and a family that waited 5 months for an autopsy report the system almost kept from them. Dr. Ukpo himself called that delay unfathomable. And yet the preliminary hearing will focus on process, on whether the digital data extraction was lawful, whether the search of the tow yard vehicle was within scope, whether the chain of custody on the bags inside the front trunk remains unbroken. The state will call witnesses. The defense will cross-examine, the judge will rule, and somewhere in the middle of all that, the ghost of the leaked file and the unauthorized viewing will sit silently at the edge of the record, never mentioned aloud but never fully absent.
And correct me if I'm wrong, it seemed like during the course of this investigation there was a bit of tension between the medical examiner's office and the LAPD. Is that something you've seen in your experience? Is there a little bit of friction between them?
I haven't seen anything.
Okay.
I've heard a lot of things. I think we all have. What I have questions about here is not so much this rumored rift between the LA County Medical Examiner's Office and the LAPD. I'm curious about the LAPD, the City Police Department, not being on the same page as the LA County District Attorney's Office. We've talked about this before, how days went by between the arrest of the defendant here and actual charges being filed. So different agencies, different roles. And yes, there are questions about these different agencies not really being on the same page. This is interesting too. You know, these are investigative bodies. But I want to point out what the defense, what reps for David's team said very early on when they said he was cooperating with LAPD. That was another example of parties not really being on the same page and messaging not really being aligned, because an LAPD captain came out later on and said, no, you know, we didn't authorize that statement. We didn't have awareness of it. And come to find out, this is the man now charged in this case. I don't believe he was cooperating with them at any point in the way that his team may have said. So a lot of different parties, a lot of different motivations, and I think
the paperwork already knew. The medical examiner's case file is public now. The security hold has been lifted, and the summary of examination number 2025-252 is available on the LA County Department of Medical Examiner's website. Read it for yourself. One question to answer in the comments: what specific phrase in that autopsy summary do you think the defense will point to first as evidence that the cause of death cannot be proven beyond reasonable doubt? We are not asking for speculation about guilt. We are asking you to read the document the system tried hardest to suppress and find the crack that 5 months of secrecy may have hidden in plain sight. If you believe that trials are decided by evidence, not by headlines, make sure you like this video, share it, subscribe to Crime Files 911, and turn on notifications. We do not chase noise, we read the filings, and we will be here when the first gavel falls on July 21st.